Okay, so thank you all for joining us on afternoon of day 2 of the Telltales Blended Learning Festival. And we've got Simon Archer, Senior Teaching Fellow in Pharmacy, who's going to have a sip of tea and then talk to us about enhancing the student experience with Moodle formula questions, which is something I don't understand, so I'm sure I will in about half an hour's time. As I said, any questions, do put them in the chat and Simon will stop as he's going along, but we'll have time to discuss at the end as well. While we're quite a small group, perhaps at the end we could all unmute and add our videos and have a discussion if there's anything in particular we need, if that works for you, Simon. Anyway, I will stop sharing and then you can take it away.
Lovely. Right. I think let's just change one thing. There we go. It's better. So, hello everyone. So I'm going to be talking to you today something called the formula Moodle question type. So let me bring up my slides because I thought I'd do it on some slides with some screenshots and then we'll go into Moodle. Just this way that we're not going to have that lag in the nature of the video as much if we're using Moodle just when my internet starts getting all loaded over. So Stuart, can I just get confirmation from you that you can see the presenter, the slides actually on the screen, please?
Yep, slides are fine and you're in a little box in the corner.
Wonderful. So I'm going to be talking about the formula types on Moodle, and you see my contact details there. So if you do have any other questions about them, I'm very happy to help you. I've also got some actual videos that I've recorded for staff members about how to use them and how to create the content as well. So work through. But just a couple of objectives of what we plan to actually achieve with this session. I'm going to introduce you to the question type. So to get you to actually understand what it is and what it can do. Actually understand the possibilities, and not just for the student and also for yourself. Is one of the ones that when I discovered, I was quite happy because it really reduced how much work I have to do, and you'll see why. And then I'm also going to show you how to actually create the question, and then I'm going to show you how to add complexity into the question. I hopefully have laid it out quite clearly with the steps, but of course I'll be interjecting after each slide when we get to that section to see if anyone wants me to go back over anything with it. So I'll give you some actual idea and the impact that these actually have had on my calculations modules. So I use them a lot in what we call pharmaceutical calculations. So it's applied mathematics. It's essentially kind of going, well, a patient requires this drug dose, they weigh this much, they have this renal function, kidney function. So it's about applying maths to a real situation. These are just some results from the actual previous 2 years of the module across our 4 years. So at the bottom, we can see we've got the 4 module names. So the first one, the IPP is first years, DPCP is, it's third years, let's put them out of order, doesn't matter though. Second years are MPPH, our 4th year students are the EBP. We can see here that this graph is just kind of just showing us that year on year, so the first column in each row is 18 and the next one is this current year is just gone. So because this is where I implemented the questions. For 2018, they were given a set amount of questions. I kind of really implemented this question type for the 19 cohort, and you can see that actually every single year's pass rate increased. We can also see that the average mark increased. And if we look at the actual 4th year, so here, the final, box out of the way. The final, this year's 4th year cohort actually had a pass rate of 100%, and their average mark was 93.5. So it's just showing that actually it can have a really big impact on your students. We've had a positive trend across all 4 years by implementing these questions. And that's down to the fact, oh, no, there we go, make the slide move on. The fact that this is a scatter plot of the grades against the number of practices. So with these, the results you saw on the first slide were from a final assessment they sat. They also then had practice assessments to do. So they had essentially an unlimited number of practice assessments, is what you'll see from the question type when I go into it next. But basically, this question type allows you to write one question with a set formula, and then the student will, every time they click on the question, will be given a different question. The text would be the same, but all the numbers will be different. So they can go and have multiple attempts. And we can see here that actually there was a direct correlation between the number of practices a student had and their overall grade. So we can see if we look down at the bottom, so right down the bottom here, students that did 1, 2, 4 practices didn't even achieve 40%. The pass mark for this assessment was 70 as well. Students that were doing 45, but well, between 20 and 40 practices, they were achieving the really high pass marks. So we can see here, all these are the students that got 100%. So they were really up there with the number of practices. I scaled this down slightly. I actually had some students who had done 90 odd practices, but then it made my graph look quite small and bunched. So I thought I would just remove that. They also scored 100%. But this is just to show you the impact that it has had on those results. Damn Windows in the way. Right, there we go. Okay, so this is an example of what the student would see. Pretty normal question on Moodle. You can see you're working in a manufacturing laboratory in Southampton. You receive a request for 535 grams of an ointment. There's the formula for the ointment. And then the formula states that you should make an excess of 20%. And the student needs to calculate what weight in grams of zinc oxide they need to make the batch. So that's the question I wrote. The student sat that. They then went back into the test, and they then got this question. So when you read it, the words are all the same, but this time, sorry, there's work being done next door. This time, we can see, instead, they actually have to make 425 grams. The formula is the same, and this time they've got to make a 10% excess. So I myself have written one question. The student so far has received 2, but if they keep going back into it, they will keep getting multiple variables from it. So that's what the question allows us to do. It allows you to set up what you want the question to look like. It then allows you to add in variables to create a big wealth, a big bank of them. So we're going to move on to the process next. Before I do that, is there any questions or anything that people have so far?
Nothing yet, but if anyone does have any questions, do pop them in the chat.
Brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to go through the process of how to do them. So the process involves, first off, writing the question. I normally do this in Word. I'd write all the questions I'm going to do in a Word document, seen here. So I've come up with my different questions just to allow me to save time in Moodle. Because you can sit there with the document, you can write a question, come back to it later, and you can start to build up that process. And I can start to adapt these in this document as well. So my first thing I would start off with was, say, writing this first prescription where it's Mrs. Laker is prescribed digoxin to be at a dose of 1.25 micrograms per kilo per hour. So I've written my question. The next thing I need to do is then use basic algebra to create the question. Now, you don't need to be scared by this fact. It just takes some getting used to, because you are creating essentially your own algebra formula to go in the background. So we've got this question. So this is the one that we took from, that we just saw as our example. Now I've gone, well, what do I want my variables to be? So in that first one, we saw that the 2 variables I had inputted was the quantity that the patient wanted, and then also what the excess was. I've kept my formula all the same, but I've just put those 2 variables in. So all I've done is replaced the number. So when I write the question originally, I would use numbers. I would put numbers in because it's the natural way to write it. Then I can insert and swap into this algebra. So here I've picked whatever I want it to be. It does not matter what you put down as your variable title, as long as you use the same variable title throughout the actual question. Don't change it halfway through because it won't recognize it. So I've picked the letter Q and I've picked the letter E, just randomly. You would then insert them into your text with the curly brackets. This is the way that Moodle then knows that, hang on, this is a number that needs to vary. So this is something which is going to be that variable. So once we've done that, we then need to tell the computer what we want the range of these variables to be. So here we can see we decide our ranges. So I've said, well, the first one, Q, which was, as we can see, the total quantity we want the supply to be, I would like it to be between 125 and 901 with an integer of 5. So essentially, every time a student clicks on question, the computer would go, right, make Q 135, make Q 850. So this is saying what I want the minimum number to be, the maximum number to be, and what I would like it to decide the integer to be. Exactly the same for E. So E, which was the percentage excess, I've said please be between 5 and 30 at intervals of 5. So it might be 25% excess. So the computer now knows to use those two in its equation. When the student clicks create question, it will populate these numbers in, and it will then use the calculation that you provide in the working out bit as the actual way of calculating the answer. So this is where I'm going to take if there's any questions first, and then we'll go on to the next step. Anyone have any questions so far? Stuart, no?
Nothing
No,
in the chat,
nothing?
no.
Lovely. Okay.
I'm just trying to rack my brains of how I would use this as a social scientist. It's one of those things that seems a really clever shortcut you found, but I have no functional use for it. But I'm impressed.
Well, you can adapt to anything. I believe you can do it with words as well. I don't know the use that would be for words. I've only looked into numbers. Can I also ask you, is the drilling and the sawing, is that too loud?
I can't hear anything.
Fine, good, lovely. So we're now going to move on to how you work out the answer. This is where I ask you to stay with me. This is quite a unique thing that you would be to yourself about how you create them. It's algebra. It takes a little getting used to, but also once you understand it, these type of things will be really good and really useful for you to do. So we know our key points here. So our key points when we use to do our calculation is the quantity. So that was our Q. The excess, which is our E, and we're asking for the excess of zinc oxide. So I need to keep in mind the percentage of zinc oxide in this cream or ointment. Because this recipe here says, well, if you're making 100 grams, so 100%, you feature 16 grams in that. So if I was making a 100-gram pot, I would want 16 grams of zinc oxide present. But I always need to make an excess. So say my excess, as in the first question, which is 20%, I actually, as standard, would make 120 grams. So I would need to add a 20% extra of zinc. So this is why we're keeping in mind this zinc factor. Okay. So now I know the 3 bits of information that are key for my question. I can then create my formula. Now, please don't log off and run away at this point. I'm going to walk through how I came to this and what these things mean. So you start off, you are always going, well, something equals and then your formula. So this is where, again, it does not matter what you pick. So I've just started with A. So I've just said my very first thing is A. And I need to calculate what A is. So how we said earlier that when you make this cream, you have 60, you need to make an excess. So I need to make 20% excess of the total quantity. So the first step, A equals Q, which is our quantity, and it's being multiplied by the percentage excess. So I'm going, actually, I need to make some extra. But how much extra? So in this situation, if our quantity was 100 grams and our excess was 20, I've gone, well, I need to do the quantity multiplied by E, which is 20 divided by 100, to work out how much excess I've created. So A is essentially my excess amount. I've then gone my next step, is I've gone, well, I want to work out the total weight now. So my total weight, or T, is equal to A, which is that excess, plus Q, which is what my final quantity is. Therefore, that means T is our total weight that I've created. So if it was 20%, I've worked out that T is going to equal 120 grams. The next step, I've gone down, well, I know that I'm creating the zinc oxide. Zinc oxide is 16%. Now here, I've got a fixed number of 16, so I can easily pop in my equation 0.616 because I know it's 16%. Compared to how the first one, because my variable E, I've had to do a little bit of maths with the E divided by 100. But with my fixed variable, I can just type the number in. So I've then gone, my total quantity multiplied by the percentage of zinc oxide, 16%, will give me my answer, or ans. So that's essentially, and that is what the student would be calculating. Then I input that as my answer into Moodle. So before I move on, does anyone have any questions?
Nothing yet.
Do we still have people with me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So, and as we saw from the original picture of the actual question, we had a little box. So this is where the student inputs their answer. And then afterwards, I've actually put the unit of measurement that their answer would be in as well. So as you can see, I've got my box with grams. I'm going to show you how to input that, because that is where you input this here, this answer. Because then that will calculate it. If the student puts the correct answer in, great. They've got the correct answer, it marks it correctly. If it doesn't, depending what feedback you have set up, it will then mark it right or wrong and give them feedback. So this is where you then put your answer in. So this is what Moodle actually looks like. This is a screenshot of Moodle. I'm going to show you the other ones in a second as well, so don't worry. But compared to when you normally use Moodle, it would say to you answer or something like that. You actually are looking at it for where it says part 1. You can have multiple answers as well. So hopefully, good, yeah. My next one, you can see I've got 2 answer boxes here because I'm asking them to work out 2 things. So here is where I would then click, they would have to click on add more parts. So it would allow you to put a second answer in. But all I've done is in my fields here, I've gone answer. I've said here, this is the answer here. Now, if I just put answer in there, it would assume that I wanted it to be to the unlimited number of decimal places. So if the answer was 1, it would accept 1. But if the answer was 1.2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it would expect the student to put in that answer to 8 decimal places, which we don't want. We want to round that answer. So I've used the code here of round, a bracket, answer, the number of decimal places and close the bracket. So what that will do is Moodle will go, the answer is 1.2345, but it will round it to 1.23. So it will round it to how many decimal places you've said you've wanted. In the part mark, you can establish how many marks the actual question is worth. And then down the bottom here is where you actually put in what you want the box to look like. Now, I took this from a different question, I've just realised, because it says metre squared. But in the question from here, it would just have a G here. So then it would appear as a box with the unit behind it. You can have text before it and then your box if you want to. You can have lots of text if you want to. So on this next slide, you can see where actually I've instructed the student which cream I would like them to put the answer in which box. So that all that text comes in here with it. And you can see it's done by using the curved bracket with an underscore, 0, and a curved bracket. That is the program to create the box. Before we move on, is there any questions?
Nothing in the chat, but I'm just interested on, and maybe you can show us when you get to the Moodle demo you said you were going to do later on in the session, but I wonder what's in the little blue circular question marks that give you help on what should go in different boxes. Because I'm thinking your point about the decimal points is the kind of thing which I expect a lot of people will trip up on, or at least maybe I'm projecting because that's what I might do.
Those little question marks just kind of tell you what you put in. They do give a little bit of information about if you want to round, so we can hover over them, have a look. They vary in their information, what they contain. Right. So this is just an example from that last page where you can see I've got those two separate, wanting those two answers. So you can see here where I've gone, actually, each answer is worth half the mark for the question. And then I've actually wanted I want the computer to round the low answer to 0 and round the high answer to 0. And then, because I have varying options, so this 6, the low, and the 17, the high, these are low and high, I've actually got my variable inputted into this box as well. So what it will do, it will automatically insert the same number that you have there in here. So essentially it allows you to constantly populate. You haven't got to alter anything, but it gives the student really a clear indication what they need to fill in for when they have to put their answer in. So that was a really kind of simple, straightforward question. But what you want to do is you want to add some complexity to it. So I've taken the same question, but I've just added more variables. So what I would recommend doing if you want to try these question types is start simple, then start playing with more things, building in more variables. So this time I've gone, here's my same information. So I've got my Q and my E, but actually this time I'd like the quantity of the ingredients to vary. Because if the student, well, no, they're getting the same question each time, they'll just basically, they'll know, well, I need to look at the Q and I need to look at the E and I'm done, I can move on. So to making sure they're engaging with the content and actually they're reading the full question, these extra variables will just help increase that. The zinc oxide is highlighted here as well, because what I can do is I can actually create 3 separate questions. Create 3 questions where I vary the drug at the bottom. So the first one is zinc oxide. The second question would ask for coal tar. The third would ask for emulsifying wax. So it requires a little bit of altering to the program, but I've essentially created 3 questions that will then self-generate for as long as possible, as many variables as you'd like. So you've done 3 questions bit of work, you've sat down, you've left it, you've walked away, you haven't got to worry about how they're going or what's happening with them. Do you need to write more? They're done for you. So they're just ways that you can add that variation in. So here you can see now I've increased my variables. So I've got my Q and my E from the very beginning, but this time I've added in ZO, CT, and EW. So other variables, and if we look at the CT, we can see that I've put decimal places in this one. So I've gone, well, the CT needs to vary between 3 and 6.1 at integers of 0.1. So therefore it'll be a more wider spread. So you can use integers in them. You could have a variation of 0.25, 0.0004 if you wanted to. And that will then give you a lot more to do with your actual steps in your process. So as we can see, the formula is pretty much the same as the first one was. But this time I've got the ZO in place of what was, ZO divided by 100, which was in place of the 0.16, because now ZO is a varying factor. The amount of zinc oxide in the cream varies. So I've added that extra bit into my formula, but then that's that done. And by using the duplicate function on Moodle as well, all I've actually had to do for that original question is click on duplicate, go in and add that extra line in of text to help alter it. Then when I want to make another question, so maybe I want to make a question asking them about the amount of emulsifying wax they would use instead, so the amount of EW. I would duplicate the question, but I would go in and just the ZO to EW. And then make sure, because what I did forget to do at the start, is make sure you change the text. So make sure you change the text on the slide where it says zinc oxide, change that to the actual medicine that you want to be, or the ingredient you want it to be. Obviously, all these examples are very science-based, chemistry-based. They've got great applications for use in standard mathematics, any basic math skills, things like that. So all of mine obviously have a slant towards pharmaceutics, but they're applicable for anything. It could be simple matter of, well, you've got John has 4 apples, Karen has 7 apples, and Katie has 12. How many apples does each person altogether? How many apples are there? You can use it in so many different ways. The text is your creation, your content, what you want to do. Okay. So this is just a couple of examples of where I've used them as well. So you can see we're asking them to calculate how much, calculate the percentage of glucose present in someone's blood stream. So here our fixed number is going to be the actual weight, the molar weight of glucose, but our varying is the molar amount. So they're using that to convert it through. So this is having a look now at what Moodle actually looks like. So you can see here, my variable is the concentration or the millimoles of glucose present in the blood. You can then see how I've got my variation here. I've then got my formula with my answer. And we can see just down here, we've got our one variable. So this is what Moodle looks like. This is where you input your random variables and your formula, or the global variables. That's where your formula goes and where you input that information in. One important thing I did forget to say, after every line, you need to ensure you put a semicolon. The semicolon is essentially you turn the computer, formula ends here, so it stops processing it. One good thing, if I was to go and save the question and the formula wasn't correct, it would not let me. It flags up with a red warning underneath whichever box it's in, and it says to you whichever line the error is on, it tells you the error. So actually, it might go line, if this semicolon was actually missing, or with a double colon, underneath it would say line 2 syntax error, formula not working. So then you can go back and review that to find out why. Here's just another example. So this is where I've used it in the nature of working out how many tablets someone needs to have for a treatment course, and then working out the the cost of the treatment course. So we can see at the top, we've been told how many weeks they're using it. So these are my variables at the top, then giving the students the information from a source, and then they've got the price down the bottom here. So they have to calculate how many tablets the patient will use that time period for. Then they have to work out how much it's actually going to cost when they give them the tablets. So this is when we start to see a slightly more complex formula. Now, because this is something that I've done for quite a while, I've been able to simplify formulas and practice them more. So sometimes I've missed out or I've amalgamated steps. This is one of my earlier ones. So you can see here, I've actually got, to make it clearer for myself as well, I know that actually the person was using this medicine 4 tablets a day for 7 days. So I put 4 times 7. Now I could just replace that with 28. But to help me write them, I've laid it out in my mind in that clear way. Because it really helps you understand how to do it. But yeah, you can see the nice little variation here. Now, the one difference that we do have in this situation, instead of having a range of numbers, saying, well, lowest is 6, highest is 12, integer of 1, you can actually say, I want it to be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever the numbers actually. So you separate them by a comma. So I could say, actually, I only want it to be these certain numbers. So it could be 6, 9, 12. So it just allows you to fill it in different ways. Then I've got my formula down, my question down here with the variations. Next one. The box is right in the way, unfortunately. So here is one where we've used a more complex formula. So the students have to do multiple steps in this situation. So we've started off by giving them a person's weight in stone and pounds and their height in feet and inches. but we've given them a formula where they need to work out the height in centimeters and then the weight in kilos. So I've given them the formula, or the equivalences, I should say, for the weight and height, and they then need to input that into this equation. So again, it's getting more complex now. So we've got our variations for our stones. We've then got the formula to convert it. So I've said K, or kilos, will equal whatever the computer's picked for the number of stones multiplied by the factor, plus the number of pounds multiplied by the factor. I've then gone, right, let's work out the height. So I've decided here to use a fixed height of 5 foot, but a varying number of inches. So the computer has to work out how many inches, inches in total. So 60 inches, which is 5 foot, plus my random variable, multiplied to give me my centimeters. I've then gone through, done the first part of the equation. So this bit here in the box where I've multiplied the height by the weight, I've done that as a separate step to make my life easier so I know how to lay it out. The next step I've done my B, which is my height and times my weight, divided by 3600. Then the last step is to do a square root. So I've used square root here. Now, this is where when you hover over this box, this little question mark here, it gives you those codes to use. It says, well, SQRT, brackets, means perform square root. So it helps, that's there to help me go, what formula do I need? Or what shorthand do I need? So that will then give me my answer, what I'm just asking the students to do. But here I've asked for it to be at 2 decimal places. So in my answer section, hopefully, in my answer section, that's where I've then gone, well, I need to round this answer to 2 decimal places. Does anyone have any questions at the moment?
No, I think you're explaining it very clearly. So
whether I understand it.
well, I'm following it, and I have very poor math skills.
No questions in the chat?
No.
No. Okay, lovely. And that is it. This is what I wanted. This is basically what I set out to do, to essentially introduce you to the question type, and kind of hopefully understand how it can be really helpful, and the things you can do with it. Obviously, as I said, all my examples are science-based and pharmaceutical-based. Don't let that be that limiting factor towards it. It's actually, there's so much out there to do with it. Any maths questions can be made easier with this type of question. And then hopefully you've also gained an insight of how to actually create them. So obviously this video is going to be shared on after the actual session. Then I'm guessing maybe my slides might be shared as well with, I'm not entirely sure, we'll find out.
Yes, if you'd like them to be, just send them to me and I'll sort that out. We have a question now from Robert about how complex the functions you can use are, the exponential or logs.
Let's have a look. I believe you can do them. Personally, they scare me to death, especially the log stuff, so I haven't actually looked at them. But let's create a question. Oh, that's new. No. Actually, while we're in this, so this is my Moodle page that I use. So you can see the number of questions that I've created throughout it. So we've got, we've got 29 questions sitting in there. There are 29 different questions, but every time I click on the preview button, I'll be given a different question. Try and remember which one it was now. This one, wasn't it? So it varies each time. So I've created one, but actually I haven't got it right anymore, but the students have an unlimited number of what they can use and what they can do with it. But let's have a look at the actual question. So we're going into the Formula 1 here. Let's drop that down and have a look. So we've got a nice, now hopefully you can actually see this. Who was the name, sorry, Stuart, of the person that asked the question?
Robert.
Robert. So hopefully, Robert, you can see this. If you can't, let us know, and I can. Oh, actually, I can zoom in. Can't I? There we go. So here you've got all the different things you can do. So yes, you can do sine. So you should be able to do some trigonometry on there as well. These are just some examples. And you can then go to more help, and that'll go. It'll go to the Moodle help page as well, which will give you the more information. So all the different things you can do it with it. Let's just have a little look through some of these things here as well. So it tells you how to actually space out your question. So using the curved bracket, that's really important. So the biggest mistakes that I've made, not biggest mistakes, but the most common mistakes, is accidentally using a square bracket instead of a curved bracket because it's the same key on a keyboard. So make sure you use a curved, and make sure you end with a semicolon. So my other one is that I used colons. And then when you're breaking up your number for your ranges, use the actual full colon. So that's the places I've made mistakes in the past. This just gives you some examples of what you can do within the main question. I think Stuart, you asked about the actual, in this part here, the rounding. So this gives you some examples of what you can do within the actual answer box. I personally just go for answer. So because you can actually put the equation of the answer into the box, but I put it inside my actual variables at the top because I've written them in a Word document. So I've done my work in the Word document as seen here. So I've done my work here. So all I've got to do is copy and paste this in, just to save me sitting in front of Moodle all the time. But if you want to, you can type. That's why it just gives you that information there. Right. And I think then what we do is stop sharing and see if there's any other questions, because apart from that, I've covered everything I wanted to do. Does anyone have any questions?
This is where you get that weird digital lag where in a normal room, see someone's hand go up, but we have to wait to see if people are typing or if you've just answered everything already.
I will have a sip of my coffee, which is now cold, but being a pharmacist, quite used to it.
Okay, well, I'll stop recording.
Yeah.
And thank you very much, Simon.